All right. Well, week 6, chapter 5. Today we're going to talk about something that I really enjoy, and that is geographic mapping and some of the resources that are available to us through different styles of mapping, not just geographic mapping, but other mapping that's involved in law enforcement that's kind of coming out. So, the book kind of shows its age because it talks about how to orient yourself with a map, and that kind of thing. I'll just tell you, I haven't seen a map in a cop car for 5 to 8 years, probably. Many departments have computer-aided dispatch. So if you have a MDT or mobile data terminal on your in your cruiser, then the dispatcher will just directly send you the location and actually usually route you right to the quickest location on how to get there. So that's one aspect. The other is GPS, and then the last is obviously cell phone GPS technology. A lot of officers, utilize those items to bypass the standard map that they used to carry around in their car. I will say before GPS, there's nothing worse than getting lost, especially when you're out in the county trying to find your way. I've never been there to see this, but I've heard of officers who just didn't respond to calls because they weren't able to find the address, and they had to go back to the station and say, hey, I couldn't find that address. So, and GPS is not infallible. There's local street names or weird spellings and those kinds of things, so it's not perfect. So during your field training officer time, your field training officer is going to spend a lot of time with you talking about maps, making sure you know the location, because even though you can use GPS and those things, that is a distraction for you as you're driving, and there's nothing better than knowing where you're going without having to utilize a GPS unit or a computer terminal to get there. So we're going to completely set aside the map orientation and that kind of thing in this chapter. We're going to skip that, and we are going to go right into actual crime mapping. So let's talk about where the concept of crime mapping came from. And I don't think it was original, but it was really the one that first came out, which was CompStat through the New York City Police Department. And so what the chief did in that case is he said, listen, New York City has a crime problem. We don't have a problem with not having enough cops. We have a crime problem, and we need to be able to identify those crime areas and reduce it. So what he would do is he had precinct captains, and every week he'd bring in the precinct captains, and he would put up a map, and he would show where the hot spots of crime were, and then he would hold those captains accountable for reducing that specific crime item in that precinct. So if you were having an auto theft problem in your precinct, chief would, in front of everybody, would say, you're having an auto theft problem. You've had 42 auto thefts in the last week. You need to reduce that. And if the next week and the week after and the week after you haven't reduced that, he would terminate those precinct captains. It reduced crime in the city of New York during this time, in the 10 years it was being used heavily, by almost 50%. So it was very effective. Now recently, every story has its other side. So recently, some stories have come out that say, that captains were changing how they reported things to bypass the system and get better numbers. So, like, let's say it was a burglary, and he said you're having a burglary problem. Well, the officers would write it up not as a forced entry. If there was no forced entry, where normally they would write it as a burglary, maybe they'd write it in as a larceny since there was no forced entry, and so they kind of skew the numbers. Maybe that was happening, maybe it wasn't. A lot of captains lost their jobs. They didn't like this chief. So I don't know where those stories came from. What I will say is it's pretty hard to skew the numbers of 50% reduction in crime. So it is what it is. So beyond the crime mapping, there's other kinds of mapping that we can use, and that's really blueprint mapping. And this is an important feature for law enforcement as we're responding to calls for service. To be able to have blueprints or building layouts accessible to our computer system, huge advantage. We know the exits, we know the inner offices, we know where we're going, we know what we're looking at. We can really lay out a plan for when we get there quickly on how to do a perimeter, how to enter the building, those kinds of things. Something we did at my last college was we actually did a videotape of entry into every single building from every entrance. So, and then we digitized it so that if we ever were called to, whatever the building name would be, we could pull up that file and look and visually see the video footage of the entryway and how to actually walk in and what we would see, and where the desks were and that kind of thing. So, so there's some advantages to some different types of mapping beyond just the traditional crime mapping. GIS is a software that allows people to store, display, and analyze and create visual representations of things that happen on crime maps. So my department, for the first time, I'm just dabbling into this. So if you guys want to see an example of this, what I want you to do is go to portal.arms.com. So portal.arms.com. And in the drop-down menu, go ahead and select University of Mississippi. And that's going to bring up an actual crime map. And you can go into this crime map, and you'll see little yellow dots that have the offenses, the location of the offenses, and what the offense is. And so it's a very awesome little piece of technology. You'll see Furman University on there. We're just setting it up this week, and we're not quite to the point where we're able to put any information out. Probably in the next week or two, you'll see information coming out of it. So this is a great piece of technology. The problem is you got to make sure everybody's on the same page, because you want to make sure you're not releasing victim information, juvenile information, social security numbers, those kinds of things. So you've identified in your reports what's public information, what can be disseminated. Well, you're not doing that manually. The system automatically pushes that information out. So if a dispatcher puts in a social security number in the wrong field or in the description box, all of a sudden that's being disseminated out to anyone who wants to log on and see. So something we got to kind of be careful of with the automated systems. But it's a great piece of technology. It's a great way to kind of show your community where crimes are, what's happening, just being very transparent. They talk about map. I said we're not going to talk that much about it. We're not, but just kind of keep in mind that a map is both visual and spatial representation. Okay. Because you do have the computer screen aspect of it, you have the visual and then you have the spatial representation. So that's all I'm going to say about mapping, really, as far as getting from point A to point B. Navistar. So this is an interesting little piece of information. I mean, a lot of people know this, but what is GPS? Well, GPS came from a system called Navistar, founded in 1978, I believe. And that's where the government put up a whole bunch of satellites. In fact, I think they put it up 24 satellites, except for they only have 23 running. They kind of have 3 as a backup system. And those satellites are just kind of roaming all over, sending out GPS signals. Up until 2001, there was what they called the SA. They were putting out signals that were SA, or selective availability. Which means that you could have that GPS unit, but if you didn't have the right codes and combinations, you were not going to get any information off that GPS. So in 2001, they lifted that SA availability and kind of let you tap into that system and use it as much as you want to. I mean, if you think about really, this system's been around from 78 to 94 is when they were installing these things. So it's been around quite a while. I mean, GPS has really just recently taken off, but it's been around for a while. The system talks about AVLs, or automatic vehicle locators. So there's a couple pieces to that. One is great for dispatch. Dispatch can look and see where cruisers are. They can dispatch people appropriately, and so that's a great feature for dispatch. Let me tell you why people fight this AVL system. Because there are so many more capabilities beyond just excuse me, the GPS piece to it. The GPS is only one piece of that AVL system. So the AVL, our department has a couple in our cruisers, one in each cruiser. The system itself costs between $300 to $500, And then for monitoring, every year it costs another $300 or $400 every year. You buy a big, huge bulk package, you can get that way down. But basically, what that system is doing is it's not just logging where you are. It's logging when you turn on the ignition. It's logging how much gas you're using. It's logging maintenance issues. It's logging speed. It's logging brakes. It's logging all this information. So a supervisor can go in and say, when was this person sitting idle? Why was their car sitting there running idle? And police officers do not like having themselves called into questions. Now, realistically, it's a pretty hard fight for a supervisor because, of course the police cruiser was sitting idle. We run preventative patrol. I was running radar. Of course it was sitting idle. Now they're going to say, you mean to tell me that on, State Route 77, in a 2-hour period, you didn't pull out after one vehicle that was speeding? Well, you can get into that, but it kind of gets technical, and that's where unions and bargaining agreements and things like that all come into play. So just something to think about with the ABL system. That's it for this chapter. That's all I'm going to talk to you about. Let's talk about your paper that's coming up in Chapter 8. You have a paper due. And so I had all these things worked out. But then I did that product demonstration of the Taser cam and of the Exxon body cam. I thought, man, what better opportunity than to have you teach me about a piece of technology. Instead of having to type up this huge long paper, I want you to research a piece of police technology, something that's new and innovative. And then I want you to create a YouTube video of it, 10 minutes. That's a lot of time to fill. I'm at 11 minutes right now, okay? So a 10-minute YouTube video, upload it, and then by the end of week 8, and then I'm going to watch that and review your review of the system. I want to hear the pluses, the advantages, the disadvantages, what people are saying about it, what reviews are out there, how many departments are using it, those kinds of things. Review a good solid piece of products. Now, you probably aren't going to have that product in your possession. You're probably going to have to use pictures and graphs and those kinds of things to show it to me. But it doesn't have to be a real fancy video, just like what I'm doing here. Just record the video and then upload it to YouTube. And, we'll see how things go from there. So good luck with that. I will talk to you next week.